This meeting is being recorded.
Yeshua.
Amen. Doing something different today again. Lord spoke to me last night. He spoke to me last night. It's something that
Yeah, I turned it on.
it's something that this message is about. And immediately when I heard the message, I'm at my office, and immediately when I heard the message, and it was in my head as I was praying upstairs in my old area. And they fixed this area downstairs. It's really nice. And I got this table here that it elevates so I can stand up and, I don't have to sit in the chair all day. What's that now? And I love it, but I never took possession of it. And the reason why it'll be made clear in the message. But I think all of us are in the same spot. And that song means so much to me. When I heard it a few years back when Daryl introduced us to it, I didn't get it then, but I get it now. I understand it now, and it makes sense. So today I want to speak from a topic, but it's going to be something that's ongoing as God gives it to me. We're going to be looking at Exodus, the 3rd chapter, Acts, the 7th chapter, and we'll go back around Genesis 46, and we'll just give a review of everything. But the topic that I'm going to use is too close. But to set the stage for all of this, I want to use a term that I've been looking for an alternative word for, but I can't find one. And it's something that, I'm always reading stuff, and some things I probably don't need to be reading, but I'm always reading stuff, and as stuff come across my news feed, I began to look at it and wonder, okay, what is this? There's something called, and I had to think through this, but there is something called what is called a liminal space, Liminal space, or a liminal place. And what that actually means is it refers to a place that a person is in during a transition period. It's a gap between what was and what's to come. And that space is like a holding space. It can be something physical. It can be emotional. It can almost it can be spiritual. It's where we were. And this space that we are in now is a holding space for where we will be. But that space sometimes is uncomfortable. That space sometimes, it can be a space of uncertainty. That liminal space that we're in, and when I saw that word and God spoke to me on that, he said, this is what you're to talk about because you're right there right now. I didn't realize it until I got to the office last night and I was sitting down praying and meditating. And he spoke to me and he said, it's all right to assume the position that I've called you to. It's all right to be the man that I've called you to be. It's all right to take control of the things that I have given you. How many of you are in that same spot where you're doubting and you feel like you're uncertain?
Oh, yeah.
That space that we're talking about now, that liminal space, I got to find another word for that because I'm going to be speaking on that and I want to use biblical characters to talk about it. I want to use the prophets to speak on this, because if God spoke to me about something like that, and as Pastor Pat says all the time, show it to me in the word. So this morning, I want to use an Old Testament prophet, and I want to deal with that. And that word, liminal spaces. And that is a space a person is in during a transition period. It ain't a final resting place. It is a place where you can come, and y'all know about the prophet. He had to get into a place where he could rest for a little while. So turn with me to, let's say we'll go to Exodus, 2nd chapter, and we'll start there. And we're going to work our way up. Y'all know where Exodus is, right? Let's go to the 2nd chapter first. And then we're going to go to Acts, and Acts is going to bring it out extremely clear to us. But I want us to read Exodus first. So we're dealing with the birth of Moses at this point. So Exodus, 2nd chapter, and I'm going to read 11 verses. Let's say amen when we get there. Are we there? Y'all can mute now.
Amen.
Okay. Verse 1 says, and there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife, the daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. And she laid it in a flask by the river brake. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done with him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Amen. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter. And he became her son. And she called his name Moses, as she said, because I drew him out of the water. Now, I want to stop there just for a second. And I want to go to Acts 7th chapter. And in Acts 7th chapter, it summarizes everything that I just read, but it gives the whole story. Acts the 7th chapter. And it reads, starting at verse 1. Then said the high priest, are these things so? And he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. the God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Charran, and said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I will show thee. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Charran. And from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him from this land wherein ye shall now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as he had no child, when as yet he had no child. And God spake on the wise that his seed was sojourn in a strange land, and they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years. And the nation whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said God. And after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. And he gave him a covenant of circumcision. So Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him the 8th day. And Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs. Verse 9, and the patriarchs moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. God was with him and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. And now there came a dearth over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers found no substance. But when Jacob heard that there was corn in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first. And at the second time, Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's kindred was made known unto Pharaoh. Then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred, 75 souls. So Jacob went down into Egypt and died, he and our fathers, and were carried over Shechem and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham brought for a sum of money of the sons of Emor, the father of Shechem. Now, he comes down, and I'm laying the foundation for what I want to talk about. In verse 20, he said, in which time Moses was born and was exceedingly fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nursed him for her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in word and deed. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them suffering wrong, he defended him and avenged him, that he was oppressed, and he smote the Egyptian. For he supposed his brothers would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them, but they understood not. And the next day he showed himself unto them as they strove, and would have set them at one again, saying, sirs, ye have brethren, why do ye wrong one another? But he said that, but he that did the neighbor wrong thrust him away, saying, who made thee a ruler and a judge over us? Wilt thou kill me as thou did the Egyptian yesterday? Then fled Moses at this saying, and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he got 2 sons. And when 40 years were expired, there appeared unto him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai an angel of the Lord in the flame of the burning bush. When Moses saw it, he wondered at the sight, and he drew near and behold it. And the voice of the Lord came out saying, I am the Lord of your fathers, of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Then Moses trembled. Verse 34, it says, I have seen the affliction of my people, which is in Egypt, and I have heard their groaning, and am come down to deliver thee. Now come, I will send thee unto Egypt. Now I want to use that as a backdrop to give you the basic information about what happened. Now, Moses, let's go back before I do this. Genesis 46. And I know I'm taking a long time getting there, but I'm getting to a point. Genesis 46 and 27. And it says, and the sons of Joseph, which were born in Egypt, were 2 souls, and the souls of Jacob's household, which came into Egypt, were 70. Now, what that passage is saying is, when the patriarchs came to Egypt, and I'm thinking of the right words here now, there were approximately 70 of them, 70. Now, some 400 years have passed by, and we come up to Exodus. And in Exodus, the 2nd and 3rd chapter, we see that God had multiplied them. God had multiplied them to where they were a great nation, and they were feared by the Egyptian, their oppressors. Now we find out that because of that fear, certain laws were enacted that you should kill all of the male-born children. And we see that if we look back in chapter 1, we find out that that wasn't done, and they still multiplied. And we come down to the birth of Moses. Now, I want us to think about this. We're talking about these liminal spaces, and I want to get down to Moses, where we want to get to that point. So Moses was born, he was a Hebrew. He was placed in the water, in a basket that was made by his mother. And his mother, after she had held him, kept him until she couldn't hide him no more. It's amazing what a mother's love will do. She put him on the water, and his sister was standing there to see exactly what was going to happen to him. So Pharaoh's daughter comes along with her maids. They see Moses there. They pull him out of the water, and she names him eventually Moses, meaning that typically what they say is because he was drawn out of the water. But in my research, and as I was praying, I was looking at that, his name probably should be the one who draws out himself. He draws out. Now, y'all, I'm going to share this with you in just a minute. So when we go on down and we get to the point where in Exodus 2 and 23, we find out something about the nature of God. Now, we don't know what happened between the end of Genesis and when we get to Exodus. Some 400 years have passed by, and we don't see how God was speaking to anyone at that point. So we get to this point, and we look at something, And I want to bring out some things about the character of God. And we look at this point when we get to Exodus, the 2nd chapter, the 23rd verse. And it starts with, and it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. And the children of Israel sighed by reason of bondage, and they cried. And their cry came unto God by reason of the bondage. And in 24, it says, and God heard their groan, and God remembered the covenant that he had with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And 25, it said, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Now, here's something I want to bring out about God that I get happy about. And I looked at that thing, and it hit me all of a sudden that our God is not like any other God. Our God is not aloof and far off, that he can't hear the things that's going on with us. Our God, like some gods, our God can be here and in another place at the same time. It ain't like some folks say, well, you got a little bit of God in the trees. You got God in the animals. You got a good portion of divinity in you. Our God hears. Now, here's what he said in this. It says, and God heard. He heard their groanings. So when we're in a dire situation, we're not in that situation by ourselves. If we are truly a Christian and we are dedicated to Jesus Christ, God will hear us when we cry out to him. And listen to what it says. Number one, God heard. Number two, God remembered that promise that he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And after God heard their groaning, God remembered his promises. And sometimes all you got to do is cry out to him. And guess what? He remembers what he said to you years ago. And he's not going to leave you alone. So number one, God heard. Number two, God remembered. Number three, he looked down. After he heard what they said, he remembered his covenant, what he promised the father, the patriarchs, the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God heard your mother's prayer. God remembered what he promised her about you so many years ago. And now in your time of need. And then God came and he looked upon the children of Israel, and God had compassion on them. But that ain't where I want to go right now. So, but I had to point out that God hears, that God remembers, and God sees all the troubles and circumstances that we have. So I go to chapter 3 now. And now we get down to the point where I place the things what I want to talk about. I want to talk about these spaces and these places that we get in sometimes. And there's a purpose in that space and in that place. And we get to this point, and we're talking about Moses. Now, Moses done killed a man. Moses is not, he's a murderer at this point. He went to his people because he had the inclination. There was something set inside of him, some kind of way he felt like that he was going to be the deliverer of God's people. He felt like if I go to my brothers and I show my brothers that God then called me to do a very specific task, and they will understand and they will act accordingly. But the brothers that he went to didn't see it. And he asked them, who gave you charge over us? How many times you've gone to someone and you've told them what God then commanded you to do, and they pushed you away. They rejected everything that you said, and they didn't understand anything about it. So look what Moses does. Moses flees. Now we're getting to the point where I want to get about these spaces and places, sometime that we get in from what was. And now we get to a point of this gap that's there, and we're going somewhere else. See, I don't feel qualified to be in the position that I'm in. See, I was talking to Derica, last night, and I was saying to myself, look, Lord, I know where I'm from. I know how I think. I came from nothing and I have nothing, and you have called me. See, my family had nothing. We grew up in the backwoods. We grew up in the projects. We had nothing, but we never knew how bad off that we was. And we always stayed together no matter what. And I said, Lord, I have exceeded. You have brought me from way back when to right now. I never dreamed of the things that you have shown me. But how can this be? Because whenever I look in the mirror, I see something different than what you see. See, I see somebody who's frail, who's afraid, who don't want to be out front, who's continually trying to go to the back, who's content with being back in the back supporting someone. But every time you are pushing me and all of us to the front because you see something that we don't see. Every time I get up in the morning, I said, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. How can I be doing anything when I don't have a clue as to what it is? And he speaks back and he says, it's not you, it's just me. But it's apparent that he sees something that we don't see. It's apparent that what we see, we are more like Moses. When God then called him, he gave all of the reasons why he can't go. But I'm getting ahead of myself right now. See, Moses, at this point, he had to flee for his life. He had to go to another place. He had to go to Midian when he's running for his life, because Pharaoh, he was certain Pharaoh knew about the deed that he had done, and he was running for his life. See, when he was running for his life, he thought he was running because of Pharaoh. But I'm here to tell you, he was leaving because of God. Moses, educated in Pharaoh's court. Moses, outstanding young man. Acts 7 tells us that. Moses, he had the stature of a prince. He had the understanding of a king. Moses, a great and learned man, began to understand what his calling. So he took it upon himself to thrust himself in that position. But that ain't the way what God wanted to do. Moses had to run for his life. He went to Midian. He was 40 years old at that point. And he goes to Midian. And when he gets to Midian, he's in that liminal space right now. He's in a place where he did not expect himself to be. He went from a palace to being a shepherd. He went from the king's house to being there in Midian, herding animals. And he get to that point, he's in this liminal space. He's in this place now as to what was in the kingly palace. Now he's in a space that he don't know where he's going and how he's going to get there. But there's value in those spaces. There's value in those places. So Moses, 40 years old, he goes to Midian, and he's sitting there right in Midian, and he meets a man, and Jethro, he gives him his daughter, but he's been there for a while. He stayed in that place 40 years. Guess what I would have been thinking? Now, that space, that liminal place, what is Moses doing while he's in that place? He was set to be a prince or a king, but now look where he is, and a shepherd. And what is happening at that point? See, Moses couldn't have understood what was actually going on. Maybe year one, he was thinking one thing, I could go back. Maybe year two, he was contemplating, maybe Pharaoh would forgive me. Then year three passed by. 40 years then passed by. And he's in a place of transition, not knowing what the future has, but looking in that rearview mirror and knowing what he had. How many times you think he was saying, but if I only wouldn't have killed this guy, I would have been eating like a prince right now. But if I only would have stayed in my lane, I would have been in comfort and not sleeping out here with the animals. Have y'all been to that point in your life? I don't know about you, but I've had second thoughts every now and then. I'll never forget the time when the Lord told me to leave my job. I left my job. And he said, Wayne, there ain't no plan B. There's a plan A. I went without a paycheck for 7 years. And God's still saying, there ain't a plan B, Wayne. There's only a plan A. See, I got in that liminal space and I didn't understand there was value in that space. See, I didn't understand how I was going to make my bills at any point. I didn't understand when I was sitting at home where everybody done left me. Nobody is sitting there. And all I got is a house, a car, a TV, and I'm sleeping on the floor every night. But I said, but God, you said, and I believed you. This cannot be the place, be that place where you wanted me to be. But he said to me, Wayne, this is where I want you. I don't know if you've been in that place before. See, I can go on about these places. See, God didn't call you and me to certain things, but we got to get in a place and a space sometime that he can take us down to where he wants us to be. He can strip away all of the stuff that you used to have. See, that place that I'm talking about is where that place where you know where you was and you look at where you are now, but you don't know where you're going. So what do you do when you're in those places? How do you deal with it when you're in those places? How do you know what's going on when you're in those places? Let me tell you what I had to do. And then I want to tell you what Moses had to do. I understood, and I'll never forget the time. I'm laying on the floor. I can't afford cable TV. I got a TV sitting there. I slept on the living room floor every night. He said, get up every morning. You put on that suit and you walk out. But I said, ain't nothing coming along, Lord. Then finally, when something came along, I had to hire somebody. And now I was back down to nothing. And I said, Lord, you couldn't have done it like this. He said, you get in that car and you put on that suit and you leave and you go every day. And I did exactly what he said. 7 solid years. And I got to the point where I said, I'm done, I'm tired. He said, you get up every morning. You get in that car and you put on that suit. So it got down one time. And this is the honest to God truth. It got down to where I had nothing no more. I'm totally broke. I've done everything that you said me to do, but I'm in this liminal space. I'm in this place, and there's some learning got to take place in this space because God told me what I was supposed to do, and I believed him with all my heart. He took everything away. I couldn't get a job nowhere. No one would give me anything, and all he said was, every morning you get up. You put on that suit and you go every day. And I said, Lord, I can do it. But I got to this one day. I had nothing left. Everything had run out. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to make it, Lord. I still got a house paid. I still got a car paid. I ain't got no food in the house. You told me to go get the food stamps. I went first time in my life I ever had. I went and I got the food stamp. But they done cut me off now. See, I've been on it just for a long time. The unemployment you had promised me, I had gotten that and it had ended. So I don't know what I'm going to do right now. So I sat down that day on my living room floor. You see, I didn't have a TV to watch. I could watch because I couldn't pick up no regular channels. But I had a DVR, a DVD player, a DVR, I'm sorry. And I would put on a movie every night and I would lay in front of that TV and watch that same movie every night because I had just one movie and I would watch it every night to go to bed. And I would get on my knees and I would say, Lord, it can't be like this. And he would tell me every morning, you get up, you put on and you go. He said, I understand. So I would do all of that. But this one time, I said, Lord, I ain't got nothing. I'm by myself now. All my furniture gone. I ain't got no food. All I got is a car that I'm still paying for. and a house note I gotta make. He said, and this is no lie, he said, get up and you go to your mailbox. I said, ain't nothing but bills in there. I went to my mailbox. I had a savings bond there that came in my name for $750 that I never bought. And it was Wayne A. Green. I opened that. I couldn't believe it. God said, it's yours. I didn't believe it. I said, if I cash this and I didn't buy it, I'm going to jail. So I called my friend and he said, is it in your name? I said, yes, it is. He said, cash it. He didn't have a job either. And I said, I can't cash this. I held that savings bond for 2 weeks and I cashed it. And I bought my groceries and I made my car payment. I made arrangements and I said, I'll make my house payment sometime soon. I knew I had at least 3 months on that, but I'm in this space and I'm in this place. This God is teaching me to depend on him. He said, I know you got a brain in your head, but you can't depend on that no more because that brain can't feed you, but I can. You see, I gave you that because I got you in this place, in a place where you strip down and you have nothing. And all you can do is depend on me. So I said, Lord, I understand, but this pain is just a little bit too great. He said, you get up every morning, you put on those clothes and you go like I tell you to go. I'm going to take you somewhere, but you got to do everything that I say. So look what happened to Moses. Moses is in this space, in this place where he knew where he was. See, I knew where I was. I was coming from a 6-figure salary. And that 6-figure salary where I'd saved everything, it had been taken all from me. Because when I found myself by myself, those who was with me then, they took everything. They took every penny that I had and left me with nothing. And I'm worried about how am I going to make it? I can't go back home because I'm a fully grown man. I got bills I got to pay and children that are in college. So whatever I had to do it at that point in time. Moses was sitting there in a place that's that liminal place, that place for a period of time, for 40 straight years. He sat in that place, knowing he was a prince, but he stayed in that place. 40 years he stayed there, being a shepherd. He had children while being a shepherd, never thinking after 40 years, I'm certain he forgot about what Egypt had. But then one day, when you're down and out and you've been in that space for such a long time, one day, the God who sees, the God who hears, the God who comes, the God of the children of Israel said, I remember what I promised you so many years ago. 400 years ago, I made a promise to your foreparents, and I'm coming. I hear where you are. I see where you are, and I'm coming for you. I'm coming to deliver you from them, but I'm not just going to deliver you. I'm going to take you out, and I'm going to put you somewhere else. So how many of you like me understand this problem right that we have? How many of you like me have been in that space, have been in that place where you didn't know how you were going to make it? You had been tarrying there for so long, and after tarrying in that space and saying in that, you forgot all about what it used to be in the past when you had everything. And now you find yourself torn down and ain't got nothing. But that space is teaching you to depend on God. So listen to what, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But Moses, when God spoke to him, at 40 years later, the God who sees, the God who hears, the God who delivers, the God who remembers came. Now, can you imagine Moses done forgot all about his Hebrew heritage? Moses had forgotten all about the heritage he had in Egypt. Moses had accepted the fact, I'm an old man right now. I'm 80 years old. I'm of no use to nobody. Look at what happens. God, after 40 years of him being in that space, being in that place, he comes for Moses. And listen to what he says. He comes for Moses. Exodus, the 7th chapter, the 3rd chapter, 7th verse. He says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, the God that sees our afflictions, the God that sees our sickness, the God that sees our brokenness, the God that sees our anxiousness, the God that sees our fears, the God that sees our troubles, the God that knows our infirmities, the God that sees the frailty of these bodies, the God that sees our groaning and our tears. He says, I know your sorrow. I know your sorrow, Wayne. I know your sorrow. I know how you feel right now. I know the sickness that you're dealing with, and you've been there for a long time. I heard your cry. I know your sorrows. I know your pain. I understand your sickness. And he says, I'm coming down. Verse 8, I am come down. I'm not just coming down. I'm coming down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians. And I'm not just coming down to deliver them. I'm coming down to bring them up out of the land to a good land. See, I understand now. See, God says, I'm coming down. I'm coming to get you. I'm coming down to see about my people. I'm coming down because I done heard your cry. I'm coming down because I know you're fearful. I'm coming down because you don't know what the future is, but I do. I'm coming down because of your apprehension. I'm coming down because the nation is in turmoil. I'm coming down because I know where your heart is. I'm coming, but I'm going to deliver you out, and then I'm going to bring you up. So how many of you need to be brought up this morning? If you need to be brought up this morning, we need to say it right now. We need to understand it now. We need to reach out in our spirit and call on the name of the Lord. If we call on him, he's going to come down. And guess what? He's going to deliver also. And when he delivers, he's going to bring us up.
Oh, Jesus.
Listen to what he says. Verse 10, 3, chapter 3 and 10 says, come now and listen to what he's saying. He says, and this is the part that gets me. He says, 10, I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. He's coming. He's delivering. He's bringing them out. And he's sending somebody also. He said, Moses, I'm going to come. I'm going to deliver. And I'm going to bring my people out. And I'm going to take them from sickness to healing. I'm going to take them from being broke to being wealthy. I'm going to take them from a no job to a good job. I'm going to take them when there's nothing in their account, and I'm going to make something out of them. I'm going to take them whose family, who had nothing, and I'm going to make something out of their children. I'm going to do all of those things. But look what he said, but I'm going to send you. I'm 80 years old. I'm going to send you back to Pharaoh, and you are going to bring forth my people, the children of Egypt, out. And Moses, verse 11, says, I look in the mirror every day. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Egypt out. See, I look in the mirror every day and I say, but I'm inadequate to do the job that you've given me. You're sending me somewhere where I'm not competent to do it. I don't have the skills to do it. I can't speak like I should speak. I shrink back when I should go forward. I don't understand why you're doing this, but who am I? How many of you have asked that same question? Oftentimes, I go to my friend and I say, who am I that I should be doing this? When I should be going to God and asking God, Lord, this is who I see. Tell me what you see. Lord, who am I? That's a good question. And I say what God says. He didn't answer Moses that question. And look what he said in verse 12. Moses asked the question, who am I? And God says, certainly I will be with thee. How many times you didn't ask God a question? He didn't answer that question. He told you something else. And he said, listen to what this says. And this blew me away. And he said, certainly I will be with you. And this shall be a sign unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve me upon this mountain. How many of you have asked God for a sign of something? Oftentimes I will say, Lord, show me a sign that this is what it's supposed to be. Now look what he did with Moses. See, that sign has got to be something that's here and now, so I'll know it's going to happen, right? But look what he did with Moses. And I shouted when he showed me this. Moses said, he told Moses, and this will be a token. This will be a sign that I have sent you. So he's telling Moses, I'm sending you right now. But guess what? That sign is in the future. That sign wasn't going to happen until Moses has did his job. Look at that word. Look what the word says. Moses says, who am I? God says, I'll be with you. And this is going to be a sign that I am with you, that I have sent you. When you done did what I told you to do, you going to worship me on this mountain. The sign was in the future. So guess what Moses had to do? I wish I could sing and I would say it. I will trust in the Lord until I die. Moses had to trust in God that he was going to stand on his word. Moses had to trust and believe that God could do everything he said he was going to do. Moses had to trust that I'm going to be all right when I go back to Pharaoh's court. Moses had to believe and trust in God that what God said he was going to do, that he is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you are like me? I don't see what God sees.
Mm.
Because when I see something, you see, like Pat was saying earlier, she says, I have been fearing something. We got our fears.
Mm.
You see, I don't see what God sees. You see, I'm talking to Derica last night. See, I came up yesterday and I had to go back to Selma and do some things. And then I had to come back this morning. So it was late when I went back and I was talking to her about it. And I said, the places that we're in, it ain't a holding cell. It's a conditioning place.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place where God is doing something, even though we don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place where he's stripping off all of these fears and getting us ready for something greater. It's a place where he can take us and sit us down. I call it my juniper tree, where I need to rest for a little while because I'm running for my life and I don't understand why things are like they are. I got that tree where the angel of the Lord can come and feed me for a little while. I don't understand why it's gotta be like that. But you got to strip all of this stuff off in order to put some stuff in me so that I can learn to trust in you. You see, Moses was there 40 years, and I complained about 7 years. And as I was telling Derica, guess what? If I wouldn't have listened to what God was speaking to me in 2010, I wouldn't be here right now. Guess what? If I hadn't listened to what he was saying when it came down to meeting you, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Guess what? When God told us, he pushed us and told us we had to leave a place where I was comfortable. And you put me in a place where I thought was not the best place, and you hadn't called for that. See, I was like Moses. And all of a sudden, I found myself in this place. But guess what? If I wouldn't have listened to what God said and spent time in that liminal space, we never would have been where we are right now. Guess what? When God spoke to me last night, as I told, yesterday evening, and I'm breaking down, and he said, take control of what I have given you charge of. If I don't listen to what he says, I'm going to stay in that holding place a lot longer. That holding place is where God teaches us. God conditions us. He strips all the crap away so that we can believe him. See, I can stand like Isaiah now. See, all of us got a year where a king or something died in our life. And now we see the Lord for who he really is. See, the year that my job was taken away from me, I saw God for who he was, who he is, and who he will be. Because I understand now, as clearly as I can today, that this liminal space that I have been in is a space of conditioning. It's a space of tarrying. It is a space of praying. It is a space where God will feed you. He will prepare you. He will get you ready for the next stage of where he will be. This ministry, we are squarely in that space now. But guess what? He is stripping away so much. See, we can't go back to First Baptist because that's what was. And we're sitting in this space right now. And he said, I'm going to send you, and this is going to be the sign. You're going to worship me at this place when you completed what you've done. I have told you to do. Verse 12. We've said we don't know what we're doing. And God says, but I'll be with you. We don't know how we're going to do this, but God has said, but I'll be with you. We said, but I'm afraid, because going from nothing, it's one thing to inherit something. It's another thing to build it. But we're saying we don't know how to do it. And God says, but I'll be with you. We're saying all the time, but we ain't got no resources. And God said, but I'll be with you. We're saying, but Lord, what are we supposed to do? And he said, but I'll be with you. We're saying, but we're afraid. He said, but I'm going to be with you. But the task is just overwhelming. The community is terrible. We are just frail people. We don't know what to do. We have no resource. He says, but I'll be with you. How many of you have heard God say that? How many of you? But when we look in the mirror, we see something totally different than what God sees. So when we come to God and we say, but who am I? Who am I? Who am I, God? And every time we ask that question, he gonna say, but I'll be with you. Notice what he says in verse 8. I'm coming down. I'm going to deliver you. I'm going to bring you out and I'm going to take you up. And then I'm going to send you. He says what he's going to do. So when we are in that space, know that God is doing the work. He's doing the heavy lifting. He's just sending us. And all we got to do is go. And you know what the sign is? I've seen the sign. Because it can't be nobody but God that done took us from where we was to where we are now. And you know, we got a handful of folks. Just a handful. I ain't talking about two hands. I'm talking about a hand. That's all we got. Who else could have done this? If y'all know somebody else who could have done it, y'all tell me. It ain't because we smart. It ain't because we got money. It ain't because we done did the right thing and did the advertising. It ain't none of that. And I said one time to Lord, and he had to correct me, Lord, you put us in the worst place. And he said, I placed you there. He said, you gonna do what I've called you to do. In verse 14, it says, and I'm closing. And God said to Moses, because Moses had a question. And that question is, who do I tell people? My people sent me. And God says, I am that I am. This is what God is saying to us. I exist. I don't need no banker. I don't need no marketing person. I don't need no police. I don't need no mayor, governor, or president. He says, I am that I am. I exist, and you don't need nobody else. Nobody else but me. We got to get to this point. Because when we look and we see our frailties, I look every day, I say, I got another gray hair. And Lord, you didn't call me to do what? Everybody else is retired and you're telling me to do what? But I'm getting tired and you're telling me to do what? I have this conversation. And you know, he says the same thing he told me way back in the early 2000s. He said, you get up, you put on your suit, and you go. Every day, that's the same thing. Because he is. And he says, I'm going to be with you. So when you're feeling down and you're feeling low, when you're fearful, and when you've expended everything, all your resources, you know one thing, that I might be in this place, but there's a reason for me to be in this place now. And what God is doing is teaching you, like he told Moses, I will be with you. Amen. Thanks.
Amen. Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.